The most underpriced players in FPL this season, in my opinion. FPL have done a pretty good job at pricing the players this season. We are made to make hard decisions in the likes of Salah versus Haaland, with Palmer, Saka and Foden all going up in price this season. But there are definitely some players who have slipped under the radar a little bit in terms of pricing, who I think are too cheap. Today I'm going to take you through those top 10 players that I think have been underpriced this year. What is up, everyone? Harry here. Before we dive in, 1,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here. Today it is underpriced players. We'll be looking for those cheap gems that are going to break the game, in the likes of Gordon, in the likes of Cole Palmer, that we've seen in the past. Those that might allow you to go and buy the likes of Erling Haaland and Mo Salah into the same draft, if that is what you want to go and do. Before we dive in, the videos during preseason are being sponsored by Fantasy Football Scout. If you want to check out their members area where I get all of the data, I look at the fixture tickers, I read articles from top managers, then you can do that all with a link in the description. They are currently offering 40% off. But the number one option and one of the best options I think in the game at the moment is Nkunku of Chelsea. Now, bear in mind, I am a Chelsea fan, so I do watch a lot of highlights. I do watch a lot of our games, and I have done during preseason. And I did during last preseason when Nkunku was popular again, but I might have a little bit of bias. I do my best to put that to one side. I think 6.5 million for him as a midfielder is going to be crazy good value this season. I don't think you should be owning Cole Palmer in your team without owning Nkunku as well. If you want to go for the double up in Cole Palmer and Nkunku, then absolutely. And further down the line, when we have more than 100 million to spend, then maybe Cole Palmer becomes a reasonable buy on his own. But at a value pick going into the start of the season, if Nkunku can stay fit, I definitely think 6.5 is a great price. Only 15% owned at the moment. The reason he's been dropped in price is because he had that bad injury record last year. But before that, he didn't have a bad injury record and he was scoring a hell of a lot of goals. And when you look at the data that he's got and you look at the fixtures after Manchester City at home on the opening day, it just seems like a no-brainer for me that he is the best 6.5 midfielder in the game to start with in game week 1. He's looking very, very lively in preseason as well. So 6.5 for me is such a bargain. Next up is a 4.0 defender who is starting to get a lot of attention, and that is Barco of Brighton. Now, just to fill in where he plans on playing, how long he's going to be in the starting lineup for, he is going to be filling in at Brighton whilst Purvis Estupiñán is out injured, which is expected to be back sort of game week 4, but probably into game week 5 or 6. There's chances he's not back until October, and with the bad injury record that Estupiñán has had, I don't think they'll be rushing him back, and I think it might be game week 6 that we start to see Estupiñán starting. But just because Estupiñán starts games, it doesn't actually mean that Barco is going to get dropped. He's a really, really fantastic talent. Anyone who plays Football Manager will know the sort of ability that this guy is predicted that he can have in his career, and he might actually continue at left back with Estupiñán filling in as a left centre back in a back 3, which would mean Barco at 4 million would continue to be a really nice option. Even if that is the case, that Estupiñán does come back and Barco loses his place, I still think at 4 million he's worth the gamble going into the start of the season. At the end of the day, most of this will be a 5th defender for you instead of a Harwood Bellows or something like that, a player you're not going to really play anyway. His underlying data last season is pretty much non-existent, but during preseason he has been starting in that left back, left wing back role and been taking some set pieces. 3 of the first 5 games, Everton, Ipswich and Nottingham Forest, you can definitely be playing him, and he rotates really well with Mykolenko of Everton as well. Talking of Mykolenko of Everton, if you want to rotate him really well with Barco, I do think Mykolenko should have been 5 million. The injury records for him last year was probably what has kept his price at 4.5, but he actually got more points per 90 over both Tarkowski and Branthwaite, who are priced at 5 million for Everton. I do expect them to continue to be pretty solid defensively under Sean Dyche. The opening fixtures are not bad, especially if you do pair him with a Barco who rotates into game week 2 and game week 4 really well. As you can see, those are the 2 difficult fixtures that we've got for Everton. I spoke about that in my best sort of cheap defender, cheap option rotation video that I did last week. If you want more detail on that, go and check it out. But I do think Mykolenko, for me at the moment, is the best 4.5 million option. Now, he did miss a friendly the other day as a bit of a precaution, and there is a little bit of sort of haziness about his injury record in the past. But I think if we go into the start of the season with him being fit, 4.5 million is an absolute bargain. Moving into midfield is 5.5 million Hudson-Odoi of Nottingham Forest. Forest have a great opening run of fixtures with lots of us looking at the defence and Chris Wood up front and someone like a Gibbs White. Personally, I think Hudson-Odoi is a much better option than Elanga. He looks much more nailed, whereas Elanga just doesn't look nailed to start games going into the start of the season. At the end of the last season, Hudson-Odoi was really good, scoring several goals, 8 goals in total last season. He has had a bit of a doubt with some of his injury records, but actually over the past 10 game weeks, he lasted pretty much 90 minutes in all of those games. So the sort of minutes risk, the sort of injury risk wasn't there at the end of last season, and he was really good. Getting a lot of goals. Now, what you will see with his data is he massively outperformed his expected goals and assists per 90 compared to what he actually did. Again, that's because of that shot he takes from the left-hand side of the box. He whips it with his right foot into the far post, which is a low XG chance, but Hudson-Odoi is absolutely fantastic with it, and defenders find it really difficult to sort of defend against that. He is a really nice cheap enabler, probably slightly more nailed than someone like a Morgan Rogers, who is also in this list, and definitely one I'm considering to allow Salah and Haaland in my draft. Next up at Crystal Palace is Eze. He has lost his partner in crime in Elise to Bayern Munich, and Mateta might not be back for game week 1, but I don't think that means you shouldn't be looking at Eze, and he's definitely one I should be looking at. To be honest, I think 7 million is just too cheap. When you look at some of the output that he can do, and you compare him to someone like a Gordon, an Odegaard, a Bruno Fernandes, who are all more expensive than him, it is just the injury record that I feel like is built into his price. But at the end of last season, they did manage his minutes well, and he was still fantastic and absolutely hauled in game week 38 along with Mateta for anyone who did decide to go there. The opening run of fixtures are really good, and with Elise not being at Palace, he is likely to be on all set pieces and probably on penalties as well. We don't know 100% on penalties because Mateta could take them, but I am thinking that it will be Eze going into this season. Looking at the underlying data, 0.7 goals and assists per 90, 0.64 expected returns per 90, a fantastic start to the season. For me, he is a better start for game week 1 over Gordon, over Bruno Fernandes, and over Odegaard. Eze at 7 million is just a better pick. Now moving up front, it is Kai Havertz at 8 million. And the fact that he's moved from a midfielder to a forward, I think they've decided not to push his price up to 8.5 million, which is where he probably should be, or even 9 million. Now, of course, there is a caveat that if Arsenal sign a new striker, then he won't be as good value. But I do think they're going to go into the start of the season with Kai Havertz as their number 9. He finished the season so well. He actually outperformed once he moved to striker Ollie Watkins and Bukayo Saka in terms of value per 90. Really, really nice option. And I actually think I'd probably pick him over Saka or Odegaard if I had unlimited forward spots. The issue with Havertz is so many good forwards going into the season this year. You've got the likes of Chris Wood, you've got the likes of Muniz, Haaland, Watkins, Isak. So it is difficult to fit him in. Maybe that's part of the reason he's only coming in at 8 million. But I think he should have been 8.5, maybe even 9 million with the other price rises for some of those Arsenal attackers. For me, probably the most essential player in the game, and maybe that means he's the most underpriced player in the entire game. That is Alexander Isak of Newcastle. There doesn't seem to be a real threat from Wilson at the moment. He might even be leaving before the end of the transfer window. And even if he stays, Isak is just their number 1 now. He finished the end of the season incredibly. 21 goals and 4 assists despite missing quite a handful of games with an injury last season. Look at the opening run of fixtures as well. Southampton at home and then Spurs at home, who they always score goals against when they do play them at home. For me, 8.5 million, he is the most essential player in your game week 1 team. You can argue Salah, Haaland, you can have a look at Foden, Palmer and Nkunku, any of these players. But for me, Isak at 8.5 million is the first player on my game week 1 team based on fixtures and the fact he should have been 9, the same as Watkins, or even 9.5 million. Next up at Spurs is Brennan Johnson, 6.5 million. And I can understand why some people haven't picked him with Newcastle away, Arsenal and Manchester United away in the first 6. But I think he will be underpriced this season. And I think looking at Son at 10 million, if they do end up signing a striker with Son on the left, Brennan Johnson on the right, 6.5 million is going to be a really, really nice price. 5 goals, 12 assists for him last season. A nice couple of opening games if you wanted to take a punt whilst Nkunku plays Manchester City. Away at Leicester on the opening day, for me, screams goals for Spurs. Leicester look really weak in pre-season so far. Definitely not the championship side that we saw because they have a new manager as well. 6.5 million. I think going into the season after this, he may well be creeping up to 7, 8 million. I think he'll end the season definitely higher priced than 6.5. Then going up front, it is Muniz of Fulham. This could be both Chris Wood and Muniz, but I am starting to look at Muniz's fixtures after game week 1 and even game week 1 against Manchester United and starting to wonder if he is the better pick over going with Chris Wood, who does always have that slight bit of risk from Taiwo Awoniyi coming back. He did have a real hot spell at times last season, and then over the past sort of 5 last 10 game weeks of the season when Fulham had literally nothing to play for. Pretty much the form of all of their players did drop off a little bit. He has been given the number 9 shirt and he has some really strong underlying data. 0.6 goals or assists per 90 last season, 0.55 expected returns per 90, and a really, really solid run of opening fixtures. I think the game week 1 fixture of Bournemouth at home versus Manchester United away for Chris Wood versus Muniz is why myself and a lot of people initially are starting to look at Chris Wood. But the more I look at the data and the sort of security of minutes, I think Muniz is going to be such value at 6 million. And finally, the darling of the preseason, it is Morgan Rogers of Aston Villa who's coming in at 5 million. Pretty much every video you see at the moment, I'm sure talking about value players is talking about this guy who was absolutely flying with 3 goals and 1 assist in his 2 starts during preseason. Looking at those opening fixtures, if you can bench him against Arsenal in game week 2, some of the nicest opening fixtures of any of the value picks. Now, they are being linked with some other players, but the preseason form and the way that Unai Emery is talking about him means I think it's going to be difficult to see him not starting some of those opening games. The data's not really there because he didn't play massive amount of minutes last season, but when he did play, 3 goals and a 1 assist from very few appearances actually for Aston Villa. So 5 million is such an upgrade. When you look at upgrading a 4 million defender to a 4.5 or a 5.5 forward to a 6 million, the upgrade from a 4.5 million midfielder to 5 million and Rodgers is some of the best investment you can do over any of the sort of other 0.5s. Like upgrading a 4.5 million goalkeeper to a 5 is nowhere near value enough comparing upgrading a 4.5 mid to Morgan Rogers. So if you are playing a 3-4-3, I think it's almost guaranteed that you should be picking him in there. And when I'm setting up a 3-4-3 or even a 3-5-2 with a rotation, Morgan Rogers is just such good value if he continues to perform as he is in preseason. So those are 10 players who I think are too cheap and will end the season at a higher price than they are now. Some of them are really popular going into preseason already, like Isak and Rodgers. Some of them maybe a little bit more under the radar, potentially like a Brennan Johnson or a Barco at the moment. Let me know what you think. Are any of these guys in your team at the moment? Are there any other bargain picks that are not on this list that you are considering? Drop any questions about your team, about these picks as well, into the comment section down below. 1,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll be back again very soon.